Okay, let's start with a big idea. What if an ancient holy book, the fundamental laws of physics, and even the mystical dimension were all pointing to the exact same reality? In this explainer, we're going to dive into a pretty fascinating claim that these worlds, which seem totally separate, can actually be unified by a single set of truths.
So that's the core question we're tackling. Could it be that Scripture and science are just speaking different languages to describe the very same thing? The argument we're looking at today says, yeah, absolutely. And it even suggests a way we can translate between them.
All right, first up, let's get into this supposed conflict between science and, the unseen. We're kind of taught to think of them as two different worlds, right? One is all about hard proof, and the other is about pure faith. But what if that wall between them isn't even real? The argument here is that there's no contradiction at all. See, a truly universal principle shouldn't really care about scale. It should work the same whether you're looking at things through a microscope, a telescope, or even digging into the nature of consciousness itself. It's all about one single truth that connects every dimension. Now, to really follow this train of thought, we've got to redefine a pretty important word, mysticism. It comes with a lot of baggage, right? But for this to work, we have to look at it through a completely rational lens. So in this way of thinking, mysticism has nothing to do with magic or the supernatural. No, it's simply a reality that we perceive beyond our normal five senses. But, and this is the absolute key, it's not about blind faith. Its truth can actually be traced and checked using rational, observable patterns you can find in nature. And that sets up a really important contrast. The usual view is that mysticism is all supernatural, totally beyond logic. But this rational view we're exploring, it treats it as something you can actually know and verify, just by looking at the signs and patterns in the world around us. This idea is the foundation for everything that follows. So, how do we find these patterns? Well, there's a specific method for it, called the universal truth principle. The whole idea is to find an absolute, undeniable truth in the physical world and then see how that very same rule applies across all the other dimensions.
This entire approach is really inspired by verses just like this one from the Quran. It's suggesting that signs of one single deep truth are literally everywhere, from the vastness of space, the horizons, all the way down to our own bodies. The real trick is just learning how to spot these patterns.
So the method really breaks down into 3 steps. First, you just observe something, a sign, in the physical world. Step 2, you boil that observation down to its most basic, universal principle, the core rule that it has to follow. And finally, you take that universal rule and use it to understand other parts of reality, from our psychology to the spiritual.
Okay, so that's the theory. It's a little abstract, right? So let's make it concrete. The source material uses a really famous verse from the Quran about a camel and a needle's eye to show how this method works in practice.
You've probably heard this verse before, yeah? It's almost always taken as a metaphor for something that's just plain impossible. But what if it's not a metaphor at all? What if it's a literal statement of a universal physical law? I mean, if you strip away the specific images, the camel, the needle, what's the core principle here? It's a simple, undeniable truth of our universe. A bigger thing cannot fit into a smaller space. It sounds super obvious, but think about it. That is an absolute, unbreakable law of reality.
And the direct logical consequence of that is just as powerful. The output of any system can never be greater than its input. You can't get more energy, more stuff, or more information out of a system than what you put into it. And this isn't just some nice philosophy, it's a foundational law in thermodynamics and information theory.
Seriously, this one principle, that output can't exceed input, is a massive cornerstone of science. It's the whole basis for the laws of conservation of energy and mass in both classical and quantum physics. It's an unspoken rule that's baked into pretty much countless formulas and constants that science has to obey.
So what's the big takeaway here? What does this tell us about the relationship between a text like the Quran and modern science?
Now, the claim is definitely not that the Quran is a science textbook packed with formulas. Not at all. The idea is that it's a source of these absolute universal principles. And these principles don't give you the scientific answers, but they might provide a fundamental framework, a guiding direction that science itself has to operate within.
So you might be wondering, well, if this connection is so powerful, why isn't this a more common idea? And that's a fair question.
The source suggests it's because we've just sort of dismissed ancient texts as being pre-scientific or unintellectual, without ever stopping to check if there might be these abstract, universal truths hiding inside their symbolic language.
And that kind of leaves us with one big, final question to chew on. If a core principle of modern physics can be found in a verse about a camel and a needle, what other fundamental truths might be waiting for us hidden inside ancient wisdom? What else could we discover if we just look past the surface and apply this kind of rational, universal lens?